welcome to the Draft Talk podcast, the podcast talking all things NFL draft. We're back. We've got the whole band back together for our mid-season special. I'm your host, Brian. We're brought to you by 99 Yards, and I'm delighted to say, joining us today, we've got Owen, MJ, and Stu. How are we doing, chaps?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Brian. Great to be back on the podcast. Great to be talking about these rookies. Some of them have had an amazing start, and some of them are just starting to come through now and show what they're capable of.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's really good to finally be talking about, at the mid-season point, the 2022 draft. Instead of looking forward, we're looking back a bit today, and just to see how these guys are doing. We're not going to write them off yet. We're not going to call them studs yet, but there's some look really, really good. So it'd be good to talk about them.
Yeah, as the guys have kind of covered it, it's just great to be back talking about these guys that we spent so long, many months ago. Doesn't seem that long ago, but we spent so much time looking into them. It's good to see how they've actually panned out. And as Brian said, it's great to have us all back together again. We've been a bit piecemeal over the last month or so, so it's great to have everyone back together. It's always better when there's a four of us here together.
Absolutely, the Fantastic Four, I think we finally call us. But yes, as we alluded to there, we're talking rookies. Some of the guys we spoke about in the spring, some have been fantastic, some have been not very good. But we're going to focus on the guys that have really kicked off their NFL career in a fantastic way. We'll start on the offense. We'll go around in a bit of a draft style, I guess. Owen, kick us off. Who have you really been impressed with so far this year?
Oh, I'm glad you did that, because I just realised that we actually didn't pick who was going to go at what spot in this rookie draft beforehand. So I
had it all prepared. Don't worry about it.
Thrilled to be going in one. So for me, in terms of overall rookie, I think it just has to be the source. It has to be Ahmad Gardner. He has been the standout rookie, you have to say. Just absolutely exceptional. 2 interceptions on the year. But what he's done outside of that has just been fantastic. Hardly targeted. I think I read a stat the other day saying he's allowed basically 7 yards when he's played on the outside, which is just absolutely unbelievable. 30 solo tackles, 2 interceptions. What else can you say? He's playing like a top 5 corner, if not better than that. Just absolutely unbelievable. There's some good corners coming out of that class, but yeah, he has definitely been the standout.
Yeah, and absolutely. He's been great. I really like this because he's the first guy I did a profile on way back. He's the first guy I picked out, partly because of the name Sauce Gardner. And it's like, well, if you're going to have a name like that, you've got to live up to it. And he absolutely has. I'm sure we might talk a little bit more about the fact the Jets have really nailed this draft class. And it's interesting, isn't it? Sauce went at 4 and he went one place after Derek Stingley. And I think Sauce Gardner has proved that he was the number 1 cornerback coming out. All sorts of stats, 10 pass breakups. I think it's a 44 passer rating against him. Just one highlight that I picked out, I think against Buffalo a couple of weeks ago, I think first play of the game, he was beaten by Stephon Diggs for a 10, 20-yard completion. And that was it. I don't think there was anything else after that. And then at the end of the game, it's Sauce Gardner who's, breaking up that kind of Hail Mary pass where Buffalo were desperately trying to get back into range. He's clearly going to be a star. I think he's up there for Rookie of the Year. And I'm just really pleased that it's all come together for him.
Yeah, before MJ congratulated himself, I was going to congratulate MJ on speaking about Sauce very early. He was on the Sauce train pretty
I was
early
on the
on
sauce.
last year. You were on the sauce, yeah. You were on the sauce. Yeah, I don't know what you're drinking just now. You might be on the sauce for all I know. He was on the sauce hype train, very early on. So yeah, and he's done really well. I hate seeing it being an AFC West guy, AFC East guy. I hate that he's doing really well. But for the Jets, he's been a phenomenal pick. And I think it speaks volumes about him when a rookie in a position that's often quite hard for rookies to come into and play well early has done so well that teams are actively avoiding him. And the fact that they're actually avoiding throwing in Sauce's direction probably tells you all you need to know about how well he has done in his rookie year so far. And we've still got a few games left of this season for him to show what else he can do.
I think it's just also one of those positions as well that people look at the stats for Rookie of the Year, defensive or offensive, but cornerback isn't really one of those that shows up in the stats, whether that's sack total or interceptions. So for him to have come through the way he has is exceptional.
Right then, MJ, who'll be your pick if it wasn't so? Right.
Okay, I'll throw in a bit of a curveball from a couple of different angles here. One is always, and we've spoken about this on previous podcasts when we're leading up to the draft, about running backs and the value of running backs and when you should take running backs, whether you should take them. I think this running back class has shown the value of running backs. There are a number of them who've come in and made an instant impact on their offense. So how about we pick one from a 1-win team so far? How about we go with Dameon Pierce? I was looking at this and I can't believe some of these stats. So first of all, he is the Houston Texans offense. That is it. They've only got 1 win. I think 4 of those losses have only been 1 score. And that's because between Pierce and their defense, they've managed to keep them in games. He's already got 772 yards. He's on double-figure carries every game. And of his yardage, apparently 94% of it is after contact. So if you've watched some of his runs, I mean, he's just bull in a china shop. You're not taking him down. I think if people have watched Carl Brandt's angry runs, that there was one where I think he something like 9 or 11 defenders who were hanging off him at one point, or he broke that number of tackles. It was astonishing. And in terms of credit where credit's due, I remember Owain being on the Dameon Pierce train from the start, and I think if Houston can get some pieces around him, they can start to build something. Obviously, it's not going to be this year, but they're going to get high draft picks again going into next year. And Dameon Pierce is definitely one to build around.
Yeah, and he's someone who came out of college. He hadn't been utilized amazingly well and in large volumes by Florida either. So you sometimes see these running backs who've had a lot of attrition, a lot of wear on them through brutal college schedules when they're carrying the ball 300 times a year. He doesn't really have that coming out of. He might carry it 300 times a year playing for Houston, right enough, but the way that they're going with him. But he's been a guy who really from the off season has had a lot of hype even before the season started. The people around Houston were saying that he was performing very well in rookie mini camps and OTAs, all these kind of things, and he's just carried that on as the season's gone on. There's been very little teams that have been able to slow him down, really. I mean, looking at his rushing yards per game, his first game was against the Colts, and he didn't get a huge amount of yardage in that game. Tennessee bottled him up in a stuffy game, but other than that, he's hitting 70, 80, 90, 100 plus yards every week. And that's what you want from your running back.
Yeah, so I don't remember how many times we say it, but how he wasn't used more at Florida is absolutely unbelievable. So at Florida in his final year, he had 100 attempts for 574 yards. Already on this year, he's had 165 attempts and 772 yards. That's just rushing. He's also been a receiving threat as well. Already got a touchdown receiving, 126 yards. So Houston have found a way of get him in the right spot, and this is what he can do for you. Why Dan Mullen and Florida didn't utilize him more well, that's why he got fired probably. But yeah, absolutely, yeah. I'm not. We won't say, but he might be kind of the second running back that I would be looking at in terms of Rookie of the Year at the moment. I think there's one that has just been a little bit better, but Dameon Pierce, yeah, absolutely unbelievable. I don't think anyone thought he would be this good in his rookie year.
Yeah, it's a great shot, especially when you think, like you say, he's their offense. They're not a good team, and to be honest, I know team. If all you've got to defend is the run, and yet you can still average, I think it's 4.6 yards a carry. That's fantastic. Good on him. Stu, over to you next. Who have you got?
Yeah, Owen's touched upon running backs. I think I'm probably going to speak about the one he's going to speak of. If he hadn't been injured, Brees Hall certainly would have been in that running, but I think Kenneth Walker from Seattle, he has really kind of taken over their running game when he's had the opportunity to. He's already just shy of that 600-yard mark. He's with only 121 attempts. Also had 7 touchdowns, which is a really good return from a running back. He's averaging just shy of 5 yards per attempt, which is really good. You see, the first few weeks he had 4, 3, 8 attempts. Then when they had that win against Arizona, it's exploded. He's hitting up that over 20 attempts a game, although the Tampa Bay run defense decided to turn up last week in Munich, which they hadn't done for quite a bit, and he dipped off there. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be over that 1,000-yard mark. He's already on 7 touchdowns. For a team that loves to run the ball, we might touch on some of their draft picks later on as we go as well, because I think Seattle have had a really good draft.
Just so this is an instance where if it wasn't for the fact that Rashad Penny, I think it was, got injured week 4, we might not have seen these stats, because you're right, he was low down in terms of numbers of carries to start with. That might have just been a part of what happens for most rookies, is they get eased into the offense as well. But then he took off, didn't he? I think there was the Chargers game where he clocked, I think, 167 yards, and one of the touchdowns he hit, what was it, 21, 22 miles an hour, something like that. He is as advertised in terms of his explosive ability, but also the fact that he is a bit of a workhorse as well as a running back. You know, you can give him that 20 carries a game. And he's part of a Seahawks offense that has taken everybody completely by surprise. None of us would have thought when they said that Geno was going to be under center, that they'd be where they are. And I think it is really interesting that already, out of the last kind of 3 games, both Tampa Bay and the Giants tried to bottle him up, and he was the focus. You can imagine that when you're playing the Seahawks, if you're coming up with a defensive plan, that probably is your starting point. It's like, right, well, we'll try and stop Kenneth Walker and try and put the game on Geno and see if he can pass around us. So that is the ultimate credit to a rookie who's, he's only 8-9 games into his career, that he's already been seen as the major threat.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of those, he can beat you in any way, which I think wise you have to give him so much respect. If you want to run him up the gut, you can do that, but you can get to the outside just as easy. Doesn't have a receiving touchdown, but has 103 receiving yards as well on 18 receptions. So he's been perfectly good as a check down option and on sweeps and things like that. So I think he's probably a shoe-in at the moment for offensive rookie of the year, especially now with Brees Hall out for the year. I think he probably would have been the one that would have been the front runner. But now I think, it's literally Kenneth Walker's to run away with.
Yeah, I've got one. I've just been impressed with. I don't think he'll win any awards, but it's Chris Olave at the Saints. They're not a particularly great team. I think you're all right saying that, 3-7. But he leads all rookies in receptions and yards. He's just looked really good, and what has been a bit of a hodgepodge offense and a bit of a sort of strange team. Like I say, he's probably not going to win Rookie of the Year, but he looks like if we're going to say, I'd say he's definitely a stud so far.
Yeah.
We had a few fans of him going into the draft.
Yeah, what he's been able to do in that probably turgid Saints offense, let's be honest. Yeah.
So many words you could use for it.
But but I suppose at the same time with whatever is happening with Michael Thomason, there's not really anyone else for them to throw to. But 658 receiving yards, is 130-ish more than any other receiver, 2 touchdowns, got 3 solo tackles as well, so clearly contributing whether that's don't know which quarterback's throwing the interceptions on them. I don't know, take your pick. But the fact that he's been able to be that productive with Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton is a credit to him. And I don't think that he was kind of our favorite receiver coming out, but this probably was around what we'd expected, just extremely productive. But this probably is this is Chris Olave, and he'll keep doing this for you.
Yeah, and he definitely stretches the field, and I think that's what I've been impressed with. His average depth of target is just over 15 yards, so he is a threat. And I think again, he's another guy where we've seen oppositions know he's a threat. The Saints haven't got much; they have to stop Olave because he's taken some real hits. I mean, he's been in the concussion protocol at least once, and there was one on Sunday where when he picked himself up, he got half of the turf all over his helmet because he just got absolutely walloped as he caught it. He's really impressed me. I'd agree. I think when we were doing it, I'd got Olave about third in my top receivers. He definitely wasn't the number one for me, but he's been very impressive, as you say, leading in terms of rookie receiving yards. And again, somebody that the Saints can hopefully build around, because it's clear they're going to be going into a bit of a major upheaval, I think, in the off season, both in terms of coach and personnel, because it's clearly not going to be one of the current two quarterbacks that for the long term. And they're a bit of a strange side, aren't they? I mean, the NFC South is a strange division this year, but the Saints are not out of it yet. But I think Olave will help them get a couple more wins. But this is a start of something for him and the Saints.
I bet they're really glad that the Saints that they traded away that first round pick in 2023 to be able to go and select Trevor Penning. That's not really panned out for them so far, has it? Oh,
and that pick is currently sitting in fourth.
Yeah,
it's not wonderful, is it? It's not good business, I don't think.
There's been a couple of teams that have done that recently. They've traded it, and then next year it's that pick's like, pick the Giants got. I think they picked the what was it? Yeah, there's been a couple. It's a bit of a risk. Right, we've done all offensive players there. We'll briefly switch to the defensive side of the ball. Who's your first pick? We'll go to Stu first.
Yeah, so I had a couple of players here, and I've probably got a few we might run through as we go later on. But for me, again, potentially going back to Seattle, Tariq Woolen has done really well as a starting outside corner for the Seattle Seahawks. The fifth rounder, a former UTSA roadrunner, and he is a roadrunner because he was absolutely lightning fast at the combine. That's one Brian will like. Yeah. And so he started from Seattle. He's got 34 tackles, one run stuff. He's got 5 interceptions already on the year. And I know that's a very variable statistic, but it is something that stands out. He's certainly got ball production. He had a pick 6 in week 4 against the Lions. He's broken up 9 passes. He's just done really well, particularly for a guy coming out of the 5th round as well, who was very much a traitsy guy. He'd been a wide receiver convert, and he's probably outperforming his draft status quite considerably at the moment. And Seattle must be absolutely loving that pick because he's just gone in there and done well immediately.
Yeah. How he fell to the 5th round is absolutely unbelievable. I had him as the 6th best corner and ranked somewhere in the 50s. I was stunned at the time that he fell that far. I don't think we thought he'd be seeing since the game against the Saints. He's played 100% of the snaps. So, the fact that the Pete Carrolls had that much trust in him is just unbelievable. It'd be interesting to know whether they thought he was going to get that far, or whether they just snapped him up because they thought, we can't let this guy fall any further. But what he's been able to do, we knew he was traitsy, we knew how athletic he was. That was his MO. But 5 interceptions, I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I think another thing that will be interesting going into next year's draft is traits around cornerbacks. Because both for Sauce and for Tariq, especially for Tariq Woolen, it's this kind of pterodactyl cornerback trait, you know, tall, huge kind of reach, and it makes you think, because I was thinking there's also Kaya Elam, who he's injured at the moment, but he had a great start to the season up in Buffalo, and it does make me wonder whether next year we'll see more and more of these cornerbacks that will go higher up because they are 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", and they've got that reach, that kind of wingspan, and that they'll go before the slot guys, before you're like, you know, your Trent McDuffie's, those sorts of players, who equally have a role. But I think it's that outside corner. I think everybody's looking for cornerback one, aren't they? They're looking for that shutdown corner, and Tariq Woolen has exceeded all expectations, and Pete Carroll and the team up at Seattle have really pulled a gem out there.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a bit of a cliche, but it's a copycat league, isn't it? If teams see long, tall corners doing well, oh, we're just going to draft long, tall corners. And you see people get all the time, people happen. If something's worked somewhere or somebody's done well, they're looking for the next version of that. And you often see these guys, oh, well, they kind of look about the same. They're a bit the same height and stuff, and they get dunted up in the draft, and it doesn't always work. But I think if you're a tall, fast corner, your chances this year are probably going to be higher than they might have been previously.
Yep. MJ, you got a defensive player for us?
Okay, this is with a sense of trepidation because the Giants play the Lions this week, and Aidan Hutchinson is warming up nicely. I think after a little bit of a slow start by the entire Detroit defense, they really have started to up the game, and Aidan Hutchinson more so than anybody. I think in terms of sacks and pressures and quarterback hits for rookies, he's now out in front in the lead, and he is showing all of that effort on the field. He had his first, I think it was his first ever interception at any level, and it was Aaron Rodgers that he intercepted and took it in for a pick six the other week. And I just think, again, it's another one of those as advertised. I think to me anyway, he's shown that we were all a little bit surprised when Trayvon Walker went first. I think Aidan Hutchinson has shown that he was probably the best pass rusher coming out. I also think, I don't know if anybody else can talk about him, but as a bit of a homer pick, I'm really pleased with how Kayvon Thibodeau is coming along. He was injured at the start of the season, and I think he's also showing great effort. But out of all of them, it's Aidan Hutchinson for me who showed that he was the premier pass rusher coming out of the last draft.
Yeah, I think what Detroit have maybe done is they've learned how best to use Aidan Hutchinson now. I think you saw him, particularly in the first few weeks, kind of right up at the line of scrimmage, hands on the ground, and he's not really an edge setter. Although he's very good in the run, although he's a tall guy, he's probably a bit leaner compared to some of the other, huge big guys at the end like Trayvon Walker and whatever. And I think Detroit have just taken a little bit of time to figure out what his best job is, and now they're reaping the rewards. I think well, this is what we've got with Aidan Hutchinson. This is what he does best. Let's put him in a position to succeed.
He's a player for me that so far has been kind of off and on. He's either whether you say you're watching Red Zone, every time they cut to the Lions game, it's him making a play, and then the following week you won't see anything of him, and then the next week he's there making plays again. So 5.5 sacks on the year, 3 of them against Washington in week 2. And then you kind of look at the stats. We're not scouting the box score, but the box score just shows zeros, then some more, then zeros again. So yeah, I think they are still working him out, which is absolutely fine for a Lions team, which don't need him to be at his best this year. So work out how to use him, and then keep going forward.
I said defensive, but you actually started us with a defensive player at line. So do you want to give us an offensive player that you're liking?
This is a tough one because there's a whole host of names there that I think would like to talk about. I'm just going to throw maybe a bit of a random one out. I'm going to go for Cade Otton, the tight end from Tampa Bay, who I think has started to come on really nicely. I mean, Tampa, we all know that the problems that they've had this year, but Tom Brady has started to really like him and is starting to favour him as a receiving option, especially over the middle. We know that Tom Brady loves to throw to tight ends, and I do think Cade Otton has started to show that maybe he can be that next one that Tom Brady likes. Tom Brady, he's in concussion protocol, or was in concussion protocol, so he hasn't been around. So Cade Otton has had to step up a little bit, but he's one maybe that maybe in this back half of the year can do even more than he's done currently. I think he's one that's outperformed what we thought he would be, and just to be that favoured target already, I think is really impressive.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it there. To be Tom Brady's one of his favourite targets that early in your career in a position tight end, which again we spoke about. Traditionally, rookies don't do amazingly at tight end. It takes them a little bit of time to figure out what's the best thing to do with themselves. And yeah, I think he scored a touchdown in the last game. Or certainly it was one of the games I saw very recently.
Yeah, against the Rams, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And he looked impressive there. He was a good option for Brady. Got himself open really nicely. So yeah, I think he wasn't one we'd initially expected to do well, but to see him performing this well and early in his rookie years is really good for him.
Yeah, can you imagine that? I mean, coming in as a rookie tight end, and you've got Tom Brady there. If you can become Tom Brady's best friend, you're gonna get targeted, aren't you? And clearly the Bucs have struggled on offense, and they've had receivers who've been out. They've had some drops in games. If you can prove to him that you're a safe pair of hands over the middle, and I have a sneaky feeling that this is the Bucs. They'll work things out. I think they will get better over the next month and a half, and I think they may well hit the playoffs in a decent run of form, and all you've got to be is at the dance, haven't you? And then it's a knockout competition. So we're all far too well aware of Brady, the Brady Gronk connection. If they've found another one in Cade Otton where he can pull in 6, 7, 8 targets a game across the middle, the Bucs offense will start rolling. Just while we're on tight ends, because we might not talk too much more about them, but I've been really impressed with some, and it's not as though they've hauled in hundreds of catches or anything, but Isaiah Likely at Baltimore. They don't have a lot in the passing game, and he has started to show. He was one of those where he is a receiver, isn't he? Let's face it, he's a big receiver. He's not really a tight end by the orthodox kind of definition, but he started to pull in some numbers. Jelani Woods, who I really liked coming out, he's only caught 7 passes, but 3 of them have been touchdowns. And okay, the Colts are on fire, but they're as a red zone target, Jelani Woods is going to grow into that kind of role. And again, with because I've had to put up with Evan Ingram for years, the Giants having Daniel Bellinger, who's come in, he's been injured. I don't know if you saw, he had a horrific eye injury, where he's now had to have a plate inserted into his face, and but he's got a couple of touchdowns. He's become again somebody that Daniel Jones goes to, and as somebody who's one of my favorite Giants players was Mark Bavaro back in the day as a tight end, and then Jeremy Shockey. Seeing somebody who might come through at that position for the Giants has been really encouraging. So I think the tight ends have shown some promise.
While we're going on a wander of players that
I'm reminiscing, I'm going down memory lane.
I'm going to go on a wander for a player who's really impressed me, and probably be no surprise to you guys. It's an offensive lineman, but it might be an offensive lineman that's a bit of a surprise to other people as well. And it's a guy who I think was well underdrafted, and I actually really like coming out. And it's Jamari Salyer from the LA Chargers. He was drafted, I can't remember which round, it was like 6th round or something like that. He was drafted
6.
Yeah, he was drafted very late. And I thought he deserved to probably be drafted further than that. I think the thought was that he was going to play at guard at some point. But they'd also drafted Zion in the first round and whatnot. So, and then so they thought, well, bring Salyer on a little bit, see what happens. Boom, Rashawn Slater, one of the best rookie tackles we've seen in a long time. You're out, Salyer, left tackle. On you go, get on with it. And he's done really well. I think he's been rock solid at the position. He's got growing pains as any rookie tackle would, but I think with him playing so well, and when Slater comes back as well, they've got themselves two really nice offensive linemen there as well, with a bit of position flexibility there as well. So it gives the Chargers moving forward 2 offensive linemen on rookie contracts, along with a quarterback on a rookie contract as well. Things to build with there. So I just wanted to give props to Mari Salyer. I think he's done a really good job since he's gone in that left tackle slot.
Yeah, he was evaluated as a guard, definitely coming out, and I do think he is a guard. But I think when we did speak about him on the, whether it's the top fives or at some point, I remember speaking about him saying that it's the fact that he offers you that versatility to kick out to tackle, which is one of his strengths. It was the college football playoff semi-final where he went up against Aiden Hutchinson, and Aiden Hutchinson couldn't do anything on him at all.
But he just completely shut him down.
Just had some length concerns, didn't he? But yeah, absolutely. He was 75 on our board, so we were right, they were wrong. I was not as usual.
Yeah. Zero.
When it comes to offensive linemen, yeah.
Your
always,
stuff.
I'm always going to say I'm right, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I won't tell you some of the butts above him though.
Oh, good. Anyway, let's move on quickly before I make a length concerns joke. Are there any sort of I just got to help myself. Ready for you guys towards the top of the round. Are there any sort of back end of the draft guys who are jumping out? I know you've mentioned a couple of guys from Seattle. We'll talk about how good their draft's been. But yeah, any sort of late rounders or mid-late rounders that maybe didn't get a lot of props pre-draft that you've been really impressed with?
I've got one I could kick off with. And I hate saying it because he's a New England Patriot, but Jack Jones, cornerback from the New England Patriots, 4th rounder from Arizona State. He wasn't someone who was really on my radar at all when I was looking at cornerbacks, but he's done really well. His snap count's increasing all the time. New England seem to do very well with cornerbacks recently, and the fact that he's getting a lot of playing time there speaks volumes. He had a nice pick 6 as well this season from my friend Aaron Rodgers. He seems to be dishing them out this year, which is really not like him. He's breaking up passes quite a lot. He's not high in interceptions, not what, but he does defend a lot of passes. He's sticky in coverage, and I think he's somebody who's done really well for the Patriots, and they seem to have cracked it again at cornerback.
Can I just give a quick explanation on that one? So he had some major character concerns, which is why he kind of wasn't on anyone's radar. And I think a lot of teams were surprised he actually went that early, and people just weren't willing to draft him because of the character concerns. I mean, go away and Google it if you want to know what they are. But obviously they were vindicated in picking him that high, and I think people just were surprised that they were willing to take on a player like that. But it's worked out. Someone I wanted to chuck in the mix in terms of a late player is a 7th rounder. That's Jalen Watson, who is a kind of defensive back for the Chiefs. Has an interception. He's played quite a bit. For a 7th rounder to get on the field is mightily impressive for a defensive player. So he's one that has definitely outperformed where a lot of people thought he would go.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I thought we can't get through a podcast without talking about a Falcon. Running back again, Tyler Algier. I mean, he was what fifth rounder. And he's come in, and this is something where I think that the Atlanta have obviously gone with a run heavy offense. There are lots of carries for running backs. There was the injury to Patterson early on, which meant that between Algier and Huntley, they had to shoulder the carries. And he's getting through these. He's now over 100 carries, over 400 yards. And I just think it's another value pick. You know, it's you can go and pick up running backs, you can go and pick up fresh legs to help carry your offense. And I think that, again, he's somebody else who's probably done more than he thought he would have, you know, in terms of carries. I think as soon as Patterson goes down and he comes in, he's starting to get a good workload. And yeah, I think he's been a really good value pick.
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a nice duo together, Algier and Patterson together, kind of, you know, thunder and lightning kind of, even though, you know, Algier can do a bit of everything, but, you know, being able to take some weight off of Patterson would be a wise idea. And say the Falcons, literally all they can do is run the ball. They don't have a quarterback who can pass, so all they can do is run. And to be fair, it's been semi-successful so far, you'd have to say.
Yeah, I just on that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, just because of the way the offense is schemed. That's why we're not talking about Drake London, really.
Yeah,
because he's just not getting the opportunities because they're not throwing the ball. And I think it comes back into situation that the rookies get drafted into, isn't it? You know, you can't expect to see much from a rookie if the scheme that they're operating is just not suited to them.
You could get me talking all day about Falcons draft plans. That's not start.
We're not starting that already, Yale. we're months out from the draft.
I'm on about previous ones. Previous draft.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
At least you're giving it the tight end a lot, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
A couple of players have just kind of caught my eye on a defense have been rubbish. But you see them make plays week in, week out, and that's safety Kirby Joseph from the Lions and linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yes, they've not been a great defense. They've kind of improved a little bit, but these guys, every week that you see clips of Lions, you see Kirby Joseph doing something and being involved in plays, and Malcolm Rodriguez is a bit of he's probably a volume tackler rather than an amazing tackler. He's going to just get a big volume playing. Is the way they're playing at the moment. But they're both players who are going to grow as the Lions hopefully grow. I think we all want them to do well. And I think that they're two players who over the next couple of years keep building on what they're doing. They've been thrown in there early, but it's going to be good experience for them. So I think they're both players that could be decent players on that side of the ball for the Lions.
Yeah, Malcolm Rodriguez was one of those that was really undersized and so was quite ignored. But it just shows that the linebacker position, if you have got the instincts and you know you've got the intelligence, then you can go out there and make plays.
Yeah, he makes plays every week. You know, he's always around the ball. If there's somebody running with the ball or taking a check down, whether he's making that tackle or whether Rodriguez is always he's always in and around the ball, which you can't go wrong. He's never lost. He's never wandering around. You know, he's good at diagnosing a play. So yeah, I think good on him. I think he did himself no harms on Hard Knocks either. He seemed quite a likable kind of guy.
Yeah, that's what came first came to mind with me, and then he has been very good.
In looking back over, you know, how the rookies are getting on, it's not surprising, is it, that we've been talking all this time and we haven't mentioned a quarterback, because we said when this class was coming out, don't expect an awful lot first year, and there's not a lot going on, is there? I think you know, it's probably Kenny Pickett who's getting the most reps, isn't it? You know, and we've now got Pickett to Pickens, one of Stu's favourites, George Pickens.
My guy, George Pickens.
Yeah, he's showing flashes, and the one I was going to mention, which I wonder, and I hope this is the case, is that with Malik Willis, I hope that the coaching staff and Malik Willis are looking at kind of the evolution of Justin Fields and Jalen Hurts before him, and Lamar before him, to see that if you look at those quarterbacks, if you look at what Justin Fields is doing this year as opposed to in year one, and if you look at what Jalen Hurts is doing in year three and compared to you know when he started, that one, not to expect too much, but two, to see that there is a path where somebody like Malik Willis in a year, 2 years, 3 years time can be as successful as those other quarterbacks.
For me, the best quarterback is so far has got to be Bailey Zappi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
there was almost a point where we thought, is this guy going to be, the star over Mac Jones, even though Mac Jones is healthier? It hasn't panned out that way, but he certainly made a case for himself, and I do wonder maybe if they weren't in playoff contention, maybe they give him another run at it, because he was extremely good. What in 4 games he had 3 of them over 100 passer rating, 6 touchdowns. Just fair play.
Yeah.
I wonder if when he was playing, Mac Jones got a little bit twitchy.
Oh yeah.
Watching him, he's thinking, I'm not entrenched as like the franchise generational quarterback. I better play well, or this guy's right on my heels.
Yeah,
I'll get 20 years like the last guy.
It just shows, doesn't it? Josh McDaniels moves on. Obviously, between Josh McDaniels and Mac Jones had a scheme that he liked and fitted well into. They've changed offensive coordinator. It's Matt Patricia now, isn't it? Who was a long-time defensive.
And Joe Judge, I think the joint coordinator.
And Joe Judge. Oh my word!
Yeah, it's some spangled version of those two together. It's mad.
And it's not working out. What I wanted to ask Owen was Desmond Ridder. Do you think, are we going to see Desmond Ridder? Is he gonna get some reps?
I think he will, but only once we're completely out of playoff contention. I think while there is a chance, then they're going to continue playing. Listening to Arthur Smith is asked in every press conference, when's it going to be time that we see Ridder, and he just completely shrugs it off and just basically when we're out. Yeah, it'll be when we're out of playoff contention. Personally, I hope it's sooner rather than later, just because of the implications going forward. It would be nice to see at least what he has, and then you can make a decision. I think if you don't play him at all, that will put the Falcons in a really tough spot, obviously depending on draft position, about whether you want to play another year with him, because you might be able to keep hold of Mariota for another year, but do you want to see this exact same thing for another year? I just don't see the point of that, really. You might as well see what he can do. If it's rubbish, that's perfectly acceptable. You can move on, but until you know that, you kind of can't move on from it.
Yeah, I think there's value, isn't there? There's clearly value with the Steelers in Kenny Pickett has taken over. I mean, he's had such a I think his first game was against Buffalo, and then he had the Buccaneers, and he's had the Eagles in there. So he's had a real baptism of fire. But there's obviously value in if he gets battle hardened through this season, which is going to remain a tough season for the Steelers, then that hopefully that will see he'll see progress into year 2. And I think the one thing that we knew about Pickett was he can run an offense. He can look like the leader of an offense, and I think it's useful in that case. That I think it'll be useful for the Steelers long term that he has actually ended up under center perhaps earlier than they anticipated.
Yeah, you've got to see what there's just going back onto Ridder there again, but obviously it plays into the other teams as well. That he was a 3rd round pick, so he is going to have to play at some point. You can't they're not going to move just straight on from him without him playing a game, because they picked him in the 3rd round. You could have used that. It was quite a valuable pick, really, that you could have used that on anything else, and you chose to use it on a quarterback. That's obviously for a reason. So it's just, it will have to be seen at some point, and it would just be handy if it was this year rather than next. But if it was next and he's absolutely turgid, then obviously you're looking at a really low pick. So it depends how you play it. Got no faith.
I've got a name for you. Friend of the pod, Rashad White.
What a game he had on the weekend. What a game.
Yeah. Drafted 3rd round. He's ran it 60 times for 222 yards and a touchdown. He's caught the ball 20 times as well. Not bad for a running back. I think if I remember, obviously you guys spoke to him. We saw him maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th round. So yeah, for a 3rd round back, it's not bad really when you considering who he's playing with and who's playing behind. Yeah,
and he's you could see over the next few weeks he will have more carries than Lenny Fournette, because Lenny's not exactly looking like playoff Lenny at the moment. Whereas Rashad White, he's got that spark about him, doesn't he? And again, I imagine there's an awful lot of weight that Tom Brady carries in that offense, and that if he says, "Look, it's this guy," you'll see more carries going his way.
I think as well, he offers that option of a check down for Brady, which Brady likes to have that just extra receiving option if things are breaking down. He'll quite happily take a check down. He doesn't always want to look for the 50-yard bomb down the field, and Rashad White, and that was one of his strengths, and he talked about it as well when he talked to us on the pod, was about his receiving out of the backfield. He's got good hands, and he's really quick with the ball in his hands.
Fantastic stuff, guys. Well, we sort of touched upon it. I sort of don't want to talk about it, but because we're in our 99 yards family, there's quite a lot of Seahawks fans, so it can be a bit annoying. But as we've said, they had a pretty good draft. A couple of corners, nice running back, good offensive tackle. Who else? Other teams that had a good draft? Anyone come to mind?
Oh, I think the Jets as well as the Seahawks, definitely. We haven't talked about Garrett Wilson, but Garrett Wilson has turned himself into wide receiver 1 for the Jets. More of that kind of like shorter field kind of slot sort of receiver. But when you think how good Elijah Moore was last year, and Elijah Moore has now gone missing because Garrett Wilson is in there, and Garrett Wilson's taking those receptions, and also that he's done that with Joe Flacco for the first couple of weeks of all people, and then you've got Zach Wilson, who is still going through ups and downs as still a fairly inexperienced quarterback of the league. But I think Sauce, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. I mean, we have already mentioned him, but his numbers were starting to absolutely take off before he got injured. He was up around 6 yards per carry and was doing really well. So I think the Seahawks and the Jets would be the two that I'd pick out the most.
I don't necessarily think the Jags had a bad draft either. That they would be one that I'd maybe throw in there. That Trayvon Walker and 1 overall. Probably is what we thought it would be. Probably not worthy of that pick, but has been solid, especially in run defense. Devin Lloyd started the season off really well. He looked like he would be in contention for defensive rookie of the year, but seems to be missing some tackles recently. They then drafted a guard, Luke Fortner, who played, I think, 100% of the snaps. He's been a mainstay on that at centre. So fair play to him. And Chad Newman's been playing every game as well, so good solid start of the draft for them. As someone, a team that continue to just hoard draft picks and just keep picking until you get one right. They seem to, over the last couple, seem to have been doing the one before where you've got Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne has been really good coming back from an injury. That they look like they're maybe starting to put some together. It's not looking like a great season in terms of wins and losses, but they look like a team that is starting to have some players about them.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs haven't done badly. I think George Karlaftis has been really good. Yeah. He's come on well. Trent McDuffie started off very well. Unfortunately, got injured. You mentioned about Jalen Watt at the end of the game there as well. He's right at the end of the draft. Sorry, he's done really well. The only disappointment has probably been Sky Moore. Hasn't really done anything yet. He's had a bit of a shaky time of it, but adding, a couple of defensive pieces to that Chiefs team, they both look, particularly McDuffie and Karlaftis, look like they're going to be really good players for the Chiefs.
So are there any, let's be a bit mean, shall we? Are there any teams that you thought did a bad job, or any players that you thought, man, I thought he was good, but maybe he's just not cut out for it?
The one mystery I think at the moment is, where is Nakobe Dean? We've spoken about this again before on other podcasts about linebackers, and linebackers can have problems coming into the league. You just mentioned Devin Lloyd, who again has been up and down in terms of started off really well, but then has missed some tackles. But in part the Eagles haven't haven't needed to bring in some of their rookies because they've been playing so well. I'm saying it through gritted teeth here, because they hit on people like Jordan Davis, who again has been as advertised. But I don't know. There were injury concerns, weren't there, before the season around Kobe Dean? I don't know whether that's still the case, but it's just a name I haven't even heard mentioned.
Yeah, I kind of touched upon it. I think I'd had hopes that Sky Moore would do well with that Kansas City Chiefs offense. He hasn't really featured very much, and we often think about guys who've not performed well, guys towards the top end of the draft, because that's the guys we're expecting to play immediately. I think a guy I really liked in the draft process, Kenyon Green, struggled. The Texans are just a bit of a struggly team, but I don't think he's covered himself in glory wonderfully as yet. Yeah, there's been a few. I try to think who else is just. There's a few, but it's difficult to say really at times, because some of these guys are maybe on struggling teams, or they just haven't found enough time on the field yet. It is still quite early in the clear to say who's going to struggle.
Yeah, I'll try maybe two questions in one here. That's going back. I think the Packers really, their draft hasn't panned out at all. And I think you're looking at underperforming players. I think you could throw a few of them in. Quay Walker just hasn't been anywhere near where we thought that he could be. And then they picked Devontae Wyatt as well, who seems I just haven't really heard about them. So I just don't think that draft has panned out the way that Green Bay hoped it would. Christian Watson dropping passes, Romeo Doubs now injured as well, and it seems to be a difficult draft for them. So you could call them underperforming. A couple of other names. I don't think Ikem Ekwonu has exactly lit the world on fire at the Panthers. Now, whether that's his fault or not, difficult to tell. But I don't think he's maybe been as good as we thought. And one last one from me would be Treylon Burks, who should have be able to get things done in that Titans offense, you would think, but hasn't been really hasn't been able to. No touchdowns on the year, only 153 reception yards. Just hasn't really kicked into effect yet. Hopefully there's enough chance for him this year, but if not, who knows? Malik Willis can't throw the ball to anyone, and Ryan Tannehill is Ryan Tannehill, so it's a difficult one there.
I'm maybe going to come out with credit there of not putting him in my top 5 then.
It's still early. We'll give him a chance.
Yeah, I think on just picking out a name you've mentioned there, Christian Watson. So that first game that they had, what was it? First play or first drive they had where he drops what would have been a 75-yard touchdown pass. If he hauls that one in, who knows? He probably kicks on. I have a feeling Christian Watson is going to be hugely frustrating for Packers fans.
Yeah.
Because even in that game last week where he gets 3 touchdowns and you're like, is this the arrival of Christian Watson? Even there were drops. Yeah, and I think he's going to ebb and flow between spectacular games and then, drive stopping drops.
Yeah.
And
I think. Oh, sorry. I think with Watson, however, there's obviously something there, because Aaron Rodgers keeps throwing the ball to him, and there must be something that's happening in training or whatever in practices that he's seeing, because he had that couple of drops against us, but he kept feeding him the ball and he got his 3 touchdowns. And I think if things had been bad and they'd been bad all the time, Rodgers, what Rodgers could be like, he would just be sacked. I'm not throwing that ball to that twat. We'll just do something different with it. But I think that there is something there with Watson, and the fact that he was just fed that ball so often by Rodgers, who trusted him in the situation to get those points. I'm reluctant to write him off just yet.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Green Bay, obviously the other thing was they got their running game going. I think if they get their running game going and they can get more stacked boxes, and Watson can get free, then there is a, you know, as you go through the season, there is a kind of a theory there that if that gets going, he'll get more opportunities. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Rodgers is such a grumpy old man now that you'd have thought one drop and that's it. You're not getting the ball again. Although he does have limited options to throw to as well.
He's not that old.
Just one last thing on Watson. I was going to say that the Packers really can't be surprised that this is what they've ended up with Christian Watson, because the college tape was absolutely littered with drops. You draft a player with traits, who's quick, who's athletic, fair enough, but he had major problems with his hands. So they can't be surprised that this is what they've ended up with. Of course, he can improve it, but it was never gonna happen in the first year.
I'm just reminded that Christian Watson was Chris Sims's wide receiver #1 coming out. Should that be any surprise? I don't know.
No, I'm just glad he saved it for the Cowboys. Cheers. Talking of Cowboys, one player it's really strange, but Sam Williams, the 2nd round pick, who was very sort of traity player, very strong, very fast, but has he got the technique? He's only played 20% of the whole snaps. He's been healthy, but not played much. But he still managed to get 3 sacks and a forced fumble. I've really been impressed with the little bits that I've seen from him, and I think that's what they'll continue to do. Use him in pass rush downs and things like that, and that seems to be effective. And while I'm on it, Sam Williams, 1st round. Not Sam Williams, just said that. Tyler Smith, sorry, the tackle who was potentially a guard and getting injury, shifting out to tackle. He's been much better than I thought he'd be. Again, traitsy, again very powerful and fast. He's great run blocking. I struggle a bit pass blocking, but been well impressed with him, and we'll see what happens when Tyron Smith comes back, what they'll do with him. But as 2 players that I weren't too sure about, I've been impressed with so far.
Yeah, there was a sharp intake of breath on draft night when Tyler Smith's name came out.
It's big,
24,
big for me,
but you know what? We'll give Jerry his due. That's worked out. And for Sam Williams, again, in terms of situations to go into, you know, Dan Quinn as your defensive coordinator, he's probably up there as, you know, one of the top 3 defensive coordinators out there currently. Cowboys defense is pretty awesome. So going into that, being able to kind of just mix him in gently into that scheme, they're getting the best out of Sam Williams, and I can imagine that he's getting a really great rookie year.
Good stuff. Right, last chance. Any final rookies you want to give it one final shout out to? I think we've done a pretty good job covering everything there. Well, there we go. We'll call that a day. Thank you very much for coming along, guys, and thank you at home, or not home, in the car, wherever it is you're listening to us. That's been the Draft Talk podcast. We will be back. We'll be looking towards the future, next year's draft, and we'll again be recapping the rookies from this year. Of course, check out the website, 99 Yards, Twitter at 99 Yards. We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.